guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to talk about the women's basketball and what's been going on there. Apparently it's been getting a lot more publicity over the last couple of years, and people are optimistic about where women's basketball is going. It seems like it's going to be really growing. It's going to be getting a lot more attention. More people are going to be watching it, even people who may have not been interested in women's basketball previously. Due to the rise of recent stars such as Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, a lot more people have been paying attention. There's been a lot of drama in women's basketball at the college level over the last couple of years, and that got people's attention. Many found it very entertaining, so all eyes are on these athletes and there's a lot to look forward to. So apparently these two female basketball players, they're planning to go to the WNBA. So they've decided to forgo their final year of college eligibility and enter the WNBA. There's going to be a draft on April the 15th, I believe. They got the opportunity to be selected by various teams. So they said Caitlin Clark is likely to be selected by Indiana Fever, and we'll see where Angel Reese goes. But both of them appeared to have very bright futures.
Barbie out. Those were the words from Angel Reese as she declared yesterday she'll be entering the WNBA draft. Let's go.
And more people are going to be watching the WNBA because of these players in particular. As soon as they join a team, they start competing against each other again. You know, there's going to be a lot more people watching, I believe. So it's a lot to look forward to in women's basketball.
There is a fun game, entertaining game, post game. There's rivalry, race, good versus bad.
Depending on your perspective,
right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, well, on both sides.
Yeah.
And the reaction to the win or the loss and how you perceive that to be. Chad, we got that. Everyone got what they wanted with Iowa and LSU in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah, and namely, ESPN and the NCAA got what they wanted because it is a huge ratings draw for Caitlin Clark any game she's involved in. And now that traveling circus moves on to Cleveland, Ohio, and the Final Four. ESPN paid $920 million to the NCAA over an 8-year period. That's their contract for 40 different NCAA championships. That breaks down to $115 million per year. $65 million of that per year is for the NCAA women's basketball tournament. Now, the NBA has long subsidized the WNBA. It's not been a moneymaker for the NBA. Maybe that's going to start to turn. There are a lot of sports in colleges across America that are essentially subsidized by the football program or the men's basketball program. This is just a reality of business. I'm sorry to Ole Miss's women's coach if this insults you, but that's the reality of finances with a lot of these sports. Women's college basketball is now turning into a profit and revenue generator. Certainly been that for Iowa and their university, and now it's becoming that for ESPN. The people at ESPN must be thrilled right now because that's a steep commitment with that $65 million they're paying for the entire tournament. But they're getting the rewards of that now. You had 4.9 million people watch Iowa and West Virginia in the second round. You had 6.9 million people watch Iowa, Colorado in the Sweet 16. We haven't got the number yet, but I'm sure it's going to be enormous for that game last night, which was a repeat of last year's national championship game. That was the most watched women's college basketball game of all time.
And I, for one, will be watching and paying more attention. So the reason I'm doing this video is to say to the coaches, to the sporting bodies, whoever, don't mess this up. It's very concerning when you hear people who are still saying that they believe it's okay for male athletes to enter into women's basketball just because they identify as women. There are people still saying this. Now, of course, these people have a lot of pressure put on them. Many of them don't want to ruin their careers. They don't want to be cancelled. They don't want to be, overlooked when it comes to being promoted, that kind of thing. If you're going around saying you don't believe, that transgender athletes should play in women's basketball, perhaps you're hurting your career prospects. No uncertain terms, it's very clear that once you start saying things like that, you will be targeted and there's going to be a lot of backlash. So the South Carolina basketball coach, she was asked recently what her thoughts are on transgender athletes playing in women's basketball. Now, first of all, congratulations to South Carolina. It was very touching to see the coach move to tears. Her team came out on top. Her team were very successful. They won the NCAA championship.
What's up? Roz and Ice here in Cleveland as South Carolina defeats Iowa 87-75 and is your newly crowned national champion of 2024. They're just the 10th champion to do so in undefeated fashion. But Ice, this was far from a given. This was a team that graduated stars, that had a new starting lineup, that brought in new players, that had inexperienced players in new roles. What impresses you most about the journey this team, led by Staley, has been able to take?
I mean, Roz, it was supposed to be a rebuild year. I feel like we can no longer use the word rebuild because she's redefined what that means. But she's been terrific. It's been terrific to watch this team weather the storm. You talk about a tough non-conference schedule that they played. Talk about winning the SEC, one of the best conferences in the country. And then to get to the Final Four, just in the way that they did it. Blowout games in the tournament, guys. And today, when it got to about middle of the third quarter, they looked pretty much in control of this game.
And Staley now, over the past 3 seasons, is 110-3, including 2 championships.
I was very happy to see that. I was very happy for the team. But this same coach was asked about transgender athletes, and she appeared to just go along with it. She said that if you're a woman, or if you identify as a woman, then you should be allowed to play.
Dan Zakrzewski, Outkick coach, you just talked about, what a massive weekend this is, obviously, for women's basketball, women's sports in general. One of the major issues facing women's sports right now is the discussion topic about the inclusion of transgender athletes, biological males, in women's sports. I was wondering if you would tell me your position on that issue.
Damn, you got deep on me, didn't you? I'm under the opinion of if you're a woman, you should play. If you consider yourself a woman and you want to play sports or vice versa, you should be able to play. That's my opinion. You want me to go deeper?
Do you think transgender women should be able to participate
that's your question
in
you
college
want
basketball?
Me to ask. I mean, you want to ask, so I'll give you that. Yes. So now the barnstorm of people are going to flood my timeline and be a distraction to me on one of the biggest days of our game. And I'm okay with that. I really am.
So there's her answer. If you're a woman, you should play. Okay. If you consider yourself a woman, you should play. So, she's all for it. She's all for biological men competing in women's basketball simply because they may consider themselves a woman. So if South Carolina are up against another team that has a transgender player and your team loses because of that, remember this, this press conference right here. Because that's what's going to happen once we start allowing transgender athletes in women's basketball. Just like it's happening in other sports. Basketball is not going to be any different. It is going to ruin women's basketball. It's as simple as that. Are people going to be as interested in watching it? I doubt it. Except for a few laughs initially. Then people probably get bored of it because they know the team that is likely to win. What I'm seeing over the last few years, especially with the college basketball, we have seen these girls grow as athletes and get better and better and be rewarded for their hard work. But once you start letting all these trans athletes in the sport, in the game, we're just going to be seeing people who are using their unfair advantage to get ahead. And what's going to happen is if this team has a transgender athlete, this team is going to want to have a transgender athlete too. And that team's going to want to have a transgender athlete or multiple transgender athletes, multiple male athletes on their team, just to have a chance of actually winning and being successful. That's what's going to happen. Some people are saying that she was uncomfortable with the question. She did appear uncomfortable with the question at first. I was wondering if she was going to answer. Even though she said that she's worried about backlash, let's be real. She will face more backlash if she said no. Male athletes should not be in women's basketball. If she had said no, she would have got a lot more backlash than she's getting from the likes of me or whoever. And not just backlash, because we can respond to what she has said and we can give our opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a difference between doing that and basically harassing the person and calling for that person to be fired and them actually being fired and losing their job. That could very well happen if she was to say, no, I don't agree with it. Let's just be real. That has happened to people. And I don't think it would be any different for her. And I'm sure she's well aware of that. So maybe she was just answering the safe way, she knows to go about it. Even when you say no comment, that's saying a lot without saying much. But still, you're endorsing something that will be the destruction of women's basketball. This momentum that the game is gaining right now, it will be stopped in its tracks. It really would be. It would be stopped in its tracks. And I'm sorry, but having notoriety because you have transgender players, I don't think that's a good thing. NCAA swimming. Riley Gaines said on Joe Rogan that the swimming didn't really have that much people watching it. It really wasn't getting that much attention until Leah Thomas came along and there was this huge debate about trans athletes and people started telling their story and, that gained a lot of publicity. So yeah, it may bring more publicity, but you don't want it to be for all the wrong reasons. And it's no coincidence that World Aquatics have banned transgender athletes in the women's category, giving them their own category though, which isn't good enough, apparently. But when it comes to, international level, they know how to make sure they're more strict or just to ban them outright in women's sports. They know how to create a third category when it comes to international sports, because this is the worldwide stage. So I do believe the more money that is put into these sports, the more attention these sports have, if it's on an international level, the more likely they are to say, no, we can't have transgender athletes in the women's category. So we shall see. But I don't think it's a good look to be a female coach endorsing the very thing that will stop the momentum that women's sports is gaining. She said it's a huge week for women's sports. And then at the same time, endorsing something that's going to destroy women's sports and is destroying women's sports. All these rising stars we see coming up in basketball and other areas of women's sports, they didn't have to compete against male athletes. These trans athletes can very well derail a female athlete's career and stop them from making it to the top levels when it comes to college sports, let alone internationally. So it's important that it's not just the international sports that are going to be on the world stage that you care about and where you ban male athletes in the women's category. It needs to be implemented on all levels, because if it's not, it can interfere with a woman's career, and that's not right. This is what's happening with those young ladies in Connecticut who are fighting these policies as we speak, going to court and arguing that their careers never turned out the way they should have, including the fastest girl in Connecticut at one point. Their careers were hindered and derailed because transgender athletes were allowed to compete in their categories. So when they should have won certain championships, it went to a male athlete instead. When they should have held certain records, it went to a male athlete instead. And that can affect everything. That can affect scholarships. That can affect qualifications. There's women who didn't make it to certain events because their place was taken by a male athlete. And that's absolutely unacceptable. And no female coach, no proponent of women's sports should be advocating for this. No female athlete should be advocating for this. It's utter insanity when I see them going along with it. Like Megan Rapinoe. It's absolute insanity. But obviously, it's not going to affect her because she's retired now. But she made sure before she retired, she endorsed male athletes competing in women's soccer. You can't have it both ways. You can't want women's sports to progress but then say that their categories can be infiltrated by males. You can't have it both ways. So it's about time. If people care about women's basketball, they need to start talking sense. They need to. And not ruin a good thing that is happening right now. And that's what I'm concerned about. You're going to ruin a good thing because you're endorsing something that is not good for women's sports. And that includes Brittany Griner as well. What's that about? Saying that she's okay with male athletes competing.
There are a number of states who are aggressively moving to prevent transgender athletes playing. In terms of on your radar, where is that in terms of advocating for athletes, all athletes, transgender athletes, to be able to play?
Oh, I mean that ranks high on the list of things that I'll be fighting for and speaking up against. Everyone deserves the right to play. Everyone deserves the right to come here, sit in these seats, and feel safe and not feel like there's a threat or they can't be who they are or like it's just all eyes on them. I think it's a crime, honestly, to separate someone for any reason. So I definitely will be speaking up against that legislation and those laws that are trying to be passed, for sure.
Yeah, these people have never competed against male athletes, on a professional level. But they're all for it, just so they can get a pat on the back by the woke mob. They'd be so intent on virtue signaling that you have a hand to play in ruining the sports that you claim to love, that you claim to be, wanting to promote.
Our next guest lost an NCAA championship to a trans athlete, as you know. Former swimmer, Division I swimmer, Outkick contributor Riley Gaines joins us now. Riley, Dawn Staley, the point guard, do you think that she'd want to play against men? Does she really believe what she's saying? It's okay for a transgender athlete to play against her women?
Of course, I don't think she believes this. And look, I love and respect Dawn Staley. 2 championships in 3 years. In 3 years at South Carolina, she's won 2 championships. I think her record is 109-3. That's unprecedented. So clearly she's great at what she does, and she's developed many incredible athletes whom I admire. But she's either proven yourself, to your point, to be entirely incompetent or a sellout. And personally, I don't think she believes what she said. If you watch the video, her silence, the hesitation, and that drink of water, I think it spoke volumes. I think she knew she had to be politically correct, and I know about as good as anyone that pressure exists, and it's real. But the bottom line is she knows perfectly well that men's basketball, it's a totally different sport than women's basketball. That's obvious by the speed of the game, the size of the ball, the sheer amount of layups in women's basketball compared to dunks when a player gets a fast break in men's basketball, the distance of the three-point line, the list goes on.
So what if a transgender athlete joins the team and is just dunking everywhere? Are we going to still claim that this is a woman?
So what I think this boils down to is she didn't have the courage to stand with women. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her, and she blew it. And truthfully, my guess is she's okay with it until her team is defeated by one or more men playing on the opposite team. People should understand that Leah Thomas, when he declared himself a man, was a Division I swimmer, but not great. He became a dominant women's swimmer. If there's a Division I player at the end of the UConn men's bench and he plays for the UConn Huskies women's team, they win the national championship by 20. Imagine in her day, Brian, right? If Karl Malone or David Robinson woke up one morning and said, I feel like a woman today, we would have no idea who Dawn Staley is. It's always funny to me how these things become okay to those who it has no influence upon. Dawn knows sure and well that she would never be a Hall of Famer if she played against men, period.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. This will literally stop us knowing the greats in terms of female athletes. This will literally stop a female athlete reaching their full potential. And that's a tragedy. There will be so many great female athletes that we will never hear about because their careers were derailed by male athletes who were allowed to be in their sports, to be in their categories. There are championships that will be won by males or teams with males on them. There are records that will be taken and held by men, never to be held by a woman again if we allow this to continue. And if you just think about the magnitude of what Riley just said there, we wouldn't know who Dawn Staley is if men were allowed to compete in her category, if she was made to compete against male athletes. We wouldn't know who she is. She wouldn't be who she is today. We can't allow that to happen to our young girls coming behind us. And having the courage to say that is worth more than anything. Because you may keep quiet now and just play along with it. But what happens when it does affect your team? What happens when it does affect your sports during your time? And what happens when it happens to your daughter or your niece? We can't allow it to happen. So we do have to have the courage to speak out. In fact, that will draw more attention to the situation. Whatever repercussions come your way due to speaking out, that's going to draw even more attention. And you can only come out stronger. You can only come out better when you fight for women's sports. Because at some point, if people keep quiet and just play along, women aren't going to have a sport. They're not going to have their own category. The moment we decide that identity makes somebody a woman, their body is completely different. Their physical strength and everything is completely different. But yet we say they're a woman. And that it's fair for them to be in the women's category? Absolutely ridiculous.
It's always funny to me how these things become okay to those who it has no influence upon. Dawn knows sure and well that she would never be a Hall of Famer if she played against men, period. So it's irresponsible and unfair for her and other retired female players like Sue Bird, Megan Rapinoe, Billie Jean King, in all sports to conveniently say they're now okay with this because what they're doing is pulling up the ladder behind them.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Piers Morgan said something similar. Wouldn't it be good if LeBron James decided to be a woman and goes into the WNBA? How would that go? Again, people don't have the guts that you have. Riley Gaines, thanks so much. Look forward to listening to you on Outkick. Appreciate it.
So very well said there. We just can't allow it to happen. Our girls deserve better than that. Our female athletes deserve better than that. They work too hard. The reason why women's basketball is becoming more and more successful is because the female athletes have worked hard. The female athletes have been persistent. The female athletes are the ones with the personalities, the drama, the fun, the skills, the team spirit, all of that is because of the female athletes. So you mean to tell me you're going to be okay with male athletes now coming along after all the groundwork that the women have done? And then a male athlete just swoops in and starts using their unfair advantage to take not only accolades, scholarships, more money is being put into women's basketball now. These women are going to start earning more. And now, maybe we will see some transgender athletes decide they want to participate in women's basketball. And then what? That's going to be taking money out of the pocket of the women who worked hard to bring the sport to where it is today. So no, we have to have the courage to say that that's wrong. And we have to have the courage to say that it should never be allowed. Some of the comments under Outkick's post. The icon says, the coach weighs the risk of standing up for women's rights against the constraints of her NCAA contract. The livelihoods of coaches hang in the balance, with many compelled to comply for the sake of their families, regardless of their personal beliefs. Wow. Yeah, so they don't believe she believed what she was saying. And people are mad at the journalist as well, because this is a happy occasion, but yet you're making it about transgender athletes. The people are upset that he asked the question because they believe he was trying to trap her, because he knows she can't really just say what she really thinks. She's going to have to play the game, and you're putting her in that position. And clearly she was uncomfortable. What other coaches did you ask this question to, Dan? I'm just curious. This is the wrong answer, sweetheart. Someone else said, okay. Dan, you're the reason journalism is dying. Women have the biggest stage in college basketball they've probably ever had. And instead of asking about Dawn's team and their greatness, or Iowa and their star point guard, you choose to again bring in politics and sow division. You're the problem, Dan. Congrats. So let me know what you think. Do you think the journalist is in the wrong for asking the question in the first place? I mean, I do agree that it should be about the women, the athletes and their hard work and their success. And why put the coach in that position in the first place? So yeah, some people are mad at the journalist. Or do you think that regardless, she should have had the courage to just answer the question honestly and say that it's wrong to allow male athletes into women's basketball. So thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, like and subscribe, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.